Hello, and welcome to PrimePRO video on setting up a client. In this video, we will cover adding a new client using the client wizard, which will take us through a step-by-step guide on how to set up our clients correctly, setting up business units such as client sites and departments for maybe warehouse 1, warehouse 2, etc., adding options and settings on how you wish to trade with this client, setting up rate types and rate labels for all the varying different shift patterns that you might need to support, setting up the rates and when they apply, i.e. adding overtimes and overtime rules, creating client contacts, consolidating timesheet data, which is basically running our weekend procedures, timesheet rules such as adding purchase order numbers to timesheets, job descriptions so that they'll automatically show onto bookings when you create them. And once set up correctly, all the calculations can be automated, which will significantly reduce administration and human error. Firstly, click on the Client tab, and this will list all of our clients within the system. To add a client, click the Add New Client wizard here. To edit any details of an existing client, click the Edit button here. To search for a client, type in the first few characters in the name box and click the Search button here. To open any existing records via the blue reference number, click here. If you click any of the column headers, you'll be able to sort the data of the list like so. So to create our new client, and you've clicked the Add New Client Wizard button, you come to the main client details page. Make sure you fill in all the fields marked with a red asterisk, as they are mandatory. If you've created branches, make sure you've selected the branches you wish this client to be visible to. It is essential that you select the right categories for this client, as this will affect what categories can be selected when creating a booking. For example, if this client is an industrial client, then only industrial bookings can be created. The client number is your internal client identifier, and this can be any number you choose. This can be useful for reporting later on. You can only create bookings for live clients, so make sure that the status is set to live if you want to trade with them straight away. Prospect and archive statuses will not allow you to create bookings. You can always change the status when using the Client List Edit feature. Click Save to move on to the next stage. Next, we come on to business units. So what are business units? Business units are the child records of the client that can be different branches, sites, departments, such as Warehouse 1 and Warehouse 2, within your client. If the client has a single address entity that does not operate different sites or departments, click Next and move on to the next stage. However, before you do so, please make sure you've added the bank holiday calendar to this client if your client pays different rates for bank holidays by clicking the Edit button here. If your client does operate different sites or departments, then click the New Business Unit button here. So if the client does operate different sites or departments, and you want to create your business units, click the New Business Unit button here, and this following window will appear. Type in the name of the site or department required here, then add the parent of the site. In this case, this business unit is going to sit under the HQ as the parent. Type in the code, as this is the client identifier for this business unit that will show on your reports. Select the bank holiday calendar, especially if you charge different rates on bank holidays for this client, otherwise leave blank. Enter the site address here. Select the invoice address preference here. Same is the address entered for the business unit above. Client is the client main address from the details tab previously. HQ can be a separate business unit in itself with a different address, and other opens up another set of address fields for a completely different address, giving you the flexibility to choose where the invoice actually goes to. Enter the invoice email address here for the particular business unit. And this is where the invoice will be sent to, especially if you're selecting the option later on to invoice by business unit. Save each business unit and add as many as required when you finish by clicking Next, and repeat the following process. So now we've created some business units for our client, and here's an example of two business units that sit under the HQ currently, Milton Keynes store and Northampton store. So once you're finished creating all of your business units, click Next here. Next, we come on to Options and General Settings. But firstly, we need to set up our client model. The client model is how to set the number of levels for a client and is vital for the system to operate correctly. A client with just one location is a single level client. A client with an HQ and then a number of sites that sit under the HQ will be a two-level client, as in this case. A client with an HQ, sites, and departments within the sites will be 3 levels. PrimePRO in fact offers a maximum of 4 levels to give you flexibility to deal with multiple scenarios. The rate card region allows you to set the number of rate card levels for the client. This should normally match the client model above, especially if you pay and charge different amounts for the same job at different sites or departments. Only use the Disable AWR option if you're using things like Swedish derogated contracts, but of course seek legal advice before using this option. Invoice By will give you the following features. By business unit, we'll produce a separate invoice by business unit, which could be site or department, which will list all the workers that worked at that associated business unit via the booking. The email address on the actual business unit that we entered earlier will be the recipient of the PDF invoice email to them. By client, we'll produce a single invoice listing all the workers who worked at that client, regardless of which business unit they're associated to. And the email address used will be the one here. By worker client, we'll produce multiple invoices, which will produce one for each worker, regardless of which business unit they're associated to. Again, the email address will be the one here. To use the apprenticeship levy percentage, we'll add a separate line item cost to the invoice based on the percentage figure added here. So if your levy is included in your rate, then it's recommended to leave this blank. Finally, the option to disable the notification for invitation. You should only really use this option if you specifically want to switch off the feature to send automatic job invitations via SMS text message or email to your candidates when filling a booking for this particular client. PrimePRO uses either SMS text or email to send the invite depending on the candidate preferences. It is advisable to leave this unchecked. Finally, click Save to continue. Next, we come on to options, days and rates. Firstly, by adding the percentage figure into the standard pension field here, it will add the pension cost to the rate card for charge rate calculation. If you have already counted for this in your charge rate, then leave this blank. Next, we're going to add the shift rate labels for all the jobs you supply this client. For example, if you supply drivers and industrial workers, here you'll add all their shift labels such as days, nights, earlies, lates, weekends, Saturday, Sunday, bank holiday, etc. You can add up to 12 rate labels in addition to your standard rate label. Feel free to edit the standard rate label, as this is your first label to use before you add any more, i.e. you can change it to days. You do not need to add overtime as a rate label if it's based on a weekly or per shift hours, as PrimePRO can automatically add overtime when the weekly or per shift hours have been reached, depending on how you've configured it in your rate cards. We'll cover this later when we come to the rate card. You can only delete additional rate labels if there are no dependent records, for example if you haven't already used them in rate cards, etc. Or simply edit the label by changing it to say something else. To enable the custom rates option, you can customize the way rates are calculated if you wish. PrimePRO will default to the current legislative values on the rate cards to calculate the charge rates, unless you choose to enable custom rates. If you don't want to use the rate card to calculate the WTR ENI costs, as you already have accounted for these in your charge rates, then add zeros into each box and click Save. Finally, please leave the following unchecked. Click Save to move on. Next, we come on to split rates. Split rates allow you to set up time triggers for when rates apply. Do remember that overtime is dealt with at a later stage. For flat rates, leave these at the default setting above and click Next. For example, a flat rate would be if you pay the same person the same amount regardless of what time of day or day of the week they work. To edit and add additional time bands, click the New Rate button or Edit button for each time range and make your changes. When creating or editing any split rate template, please ensure that you have covered a rate label for each hour of each day over a 7-day period. Otherwise, the template won't work. In the next page, you'll see an example. So to create our new split rate template, click the New Template blue button here. Enter the name, in this case, Warehouse Operative, and click Save. Now we're going to add the rate triggers for our new template. Click the New Rate button here, which is located right of the new template name. In this screen, you will select how many days the rate will apply by clicking the drop-down. Then add the start and end time, in my case 6 AM to 6 PM. Finally, selecting the rate label days and click Save. Repeat this process, making sure you have covered 24 hours for each day. My template is now complete, and you will notice that my day rates are 6 AM to 6 PM, and my night rates are 6 PM to midnight, and then from midnight to 6 AM. This is because the night crosses to another day, so in all cases you must follow this pattern of adding each night time range to midnight and then past midnight. You will also notice on my template I have changed the day rate label to weekend for Saturdays and for Sunday days. This is because I'm paying and charging a different amount for weekends. To sum up, the combination of rate labels and split rate templates allows you to create many different shift pattern scenarios and rate triggers. When you're finished, scroll to the bottom of the page and click Next. Next, we come on to labour grades. Labour grades are all the jobs you supply your client, and under each labour grade sits the rate card. First, we're going to add and create our new job or labour grade here by clicking this button. So my job or labour grade is going to be warehouse operative in this example. I've added job code number 1 being the first one in this client. The weekly booking hours are default at 40, which is going to affect the charge calculation in the rate card, which we'll look at in a minute. And of course the category is industrial for this particular job. And I've set it to be AWR applicable. When you've finished adding your labour grade, click Save. Then we can see our labour grade added in this list. Next, we're going to click on the rate card here. Next, our labour grades. Firstly, you need to decide what rate label applies on bank holiday days and click Save. You'll notice I've chosen nights for my bank holiday rates. Of course, you can create a new rate label called Bank Holiday if you want to use a dedicated rate for bank holidays. Since the rate card region is set to 2 levels in Options General Settings, I can have different rate cards for each business unit for the same job. So in other words, for my warehouse operative, I can have a different amount of pay whether they work at Northampton or Milton Keynes. Then click the View Rates to open the rate card for each individual region to set up the pay and charge rates. Next, we open our rate card for our warehouse operative at Northampton. Firstly, this rate card has no overtime rules set. Next, we're going to add the pay rates for days, nights and weekends. When the pay rate is entered, the standard WTR and ENI is added to the pay rate as your cost, where the charge rate will add these amounts together including your margin, which by the way is entered in pounds and pence only. The weekly hours on the right hand column here will change the rate calculation as it affects how ENI is calculated. You have a choice to change these values from the system default, as shown here, by using the Enable Custom Rates option shown earlier in this video. Once you're finished with your rate card, click Save Changes and then click Back. In this example, if you don't want to use our standard WTR and ENI costs to help calculate the charge rate, then in the previous days and rates screen, as shown earlier in this video, enable the Custom Rates option and put a 0 in each box and save. This then replaces the standard values currently set at 12.07% for holiday pay, 13.8% for ENI with a £162 threshold. This will then replace them with 0 and therefore will not add any costs to your pay rates. Once you're finished, again click Save and Back. In this example, we are using overtime per shift, where overtime will apply after 8 hours, as entered here. You'll immediately notice 2 columns where you can add the pay rates for standard hours and overtime hours, and also your margins for both. That in turn updates the client charge rates for both standard and overtime hours. Combined with the split rate templates, PrimePRO knows exactly when to apply day or night rates and day or night overtime based on the timesheet start and finish times. Once you're finished with your rate card, click Save and Back. In our final example, we're using overtime per week, where overtime will apply in this case after 40 hours from the start of the week. Please note that you can set your system week start from any day. However, this applies to all clients as it is a global setting. Therefore, if your system is set to Monday start, then as soon as 40 hours has been reached from Monday, overtime will trigger. Enter your overtime pay rate and margin, and once you've clicked Save, the overtime charge rate will appear. Finally, you can add the pay rates and the margins for your standard hours. Once you're finished, click Save and Back. Simply repeat the process for all regions and the AWR rate cards for your labour grade, and in my example for my warehouse operative. Once finished, click Back. Once you have finished adding all of your labour grades and rate cards, simply click Next. Next, we add our client contacts. Simply add the new contact button here and the following pop-up window will appear. Simply fill in the details and make sure that the contacts are assigned to the relevant categories of your temporary workers they are responsible for. They can be assigned to more than one category so that they will appear to the relevant bookings when you create them in the future. Once you're finished adding the contacts, click Next. Next, we come onto Options Timesheets. If your client requires a purchase order number, by checking this box, it will add a mandatory field to the purchase order number box on the timesheet, and it won't allow you to approve that timesheet unless an order number has been entered. The Require Order ID is not an active feature in the software, so please ignore this one. Please also leave unchecked the following options to edit timesheet pay rate and edit timesheet charge rate. These are no longer required in the software as they have been superseded by the manual override function on the timesheet, which offers superior functionality. Clients can approve timesheets online, so by checking this option, we'll enable this particular client to approve timesheets online via the portal. Please remember that you will have to set up the portal users to access the online timesheet portal for them to input and approve, and we will show you this later in another video. When you're done, click Save. Next, we go to Options Consolidation. Normally, you will choose to carry out a weekly manual consolidation, otherwise known as a weekend procedure of your agency's timesheets. Once completed, it will produce a payroll file, any self-bill invoices for limited company contractors, any umbrella files, and invoices for your clients. In the initial weeks, we recommend that you leave this unchecked and manually run consolidation once you know all your timesheets are completed. Here you can set the invoice header for each individual client, and this can be used for client-specific terms of business such as payment within 30 days, etc. Leaving this blank will default to the word invoice at the top of the invoice. Limited company invoices VAT exempt option usually only applies in the public sector for certain medical grades. If you're unsure, please leave this unticked. Finally, once you're finished, click Save. Next, we come to job descriptions. Job descriptions can be set so that you can preload job information onto any booking you create for this client. The job description, when used on a booking, will provide additional information that is sent via SMS text message or email as part of the booking confirmation. Therefore, it is advisable to keep it brief. To create a new job description, simply click on the New Job Description button here and a pop-up box will appear where you can simply add your job description. When you're finished, click Next. Once a client is set up correctly, the system will automatically apply the correct rules and rates. The benefits of front-loading this information will pay dividends by significantly reducing your agency's admin time. If you're unsure, please contact your system administrator who will assist you and can direct any queries to PrimePRO software. It is important to follow all the steps in the order shown to ensure the correct setup of a client.